She tapped her wine glass 3 times with the back of her fork. Not loud, just enough for the table to fall quiet. That's when I knew she was about to say something weird. Rowena only did the glass tap when she wanted attention in the most uncomfortable way possible. Last time she did it was during a game night when she announced she'd accidentally joined a cult's email list and kind of liked the reading materials. But this time wasn't quirky. It was final. Let me explain. Or, I guess, let me rewind about 4 hours. We were having dinner with her family. Her parents. Her brother and his wife. Her weird aunt with the fake British accent who, I swear to God, used to be named Brenda but now insists it's Brendy H. I didn't want to go. I had a weird gut feeling all day. Not like she's cheating or this is the end. No, not that obvious. Just this weird itch behind my ribs, like something was about to change. And not in a good way. The dinner was lasagna. Store-bought. Her mom served it like it was some sacred family recipe, but the plastic tray was still steaming in the trash when I went to grab a paper towel. Everyone was pretending to be interested in her dad's story about his neighbor stealing his recycling bin. And then Rowena tapped her glass. 3 soft, deliberate taps. Everyone looked at her. She stood up, didn't clear her throat, didn't giggle nervously, just looked at me and said, "I've decided I'm done pretending he's interesting." Nobody laughed, because she wasn't joking. I blinked, smiled awkwardly. I thought maybe this was some inside joke I'd forgotten. A callback to a dumb fight or something we joked about in therapy. But then her brother nodded. Her mom closed her eyes. Her aunt sipped her wine and whispered, "Finally." What? Finally? I asked her what that meant. My voice cracked halfway through the sentence like I was a teenager in a school play. She looked at me like I was a spreadsheet that wouldn't load. "I mean, you do the voice," she added, turning to her family. "You know, the voice he does when he talks about road signs?" I felt the room tilt sideways. Her brother started laughing. Her sister-in-law added, "It's like he narrates his own boring thoughts out loud." I didn't know what was happening. I still don't. But the worst part? I stayed through dessert. I just sat there, like a spare chair. It wasn't until I got home, 3 hours later, that I opened her laptop and found something that finally explained everything. Well, almost everything. And what I found, that's what really broke me. I wasn't planning to touch her laptop. I really wasn't. But when we got home after that bizarre dinner, after her weird, humiliating speech about me being uninteresting, and after I sat through cherry pie like I wasn't internally spiraling, she went straight to the shower. Didn't say a word. Didn't ask if I was okay. Just dropped her purse, kicked off her heels, and closed the door behind her like we were strangers who happened to share a lease. And her laptop was just sitting there, on the couch, still open, still humming, the screen glowing softly like it had something to confess. Now, I'm not the guy who snoops. I've always thought it was a little desperate. But something in my gut told me this wasn't a normal fight. This wasn't even a fight. This was a performance, and I was the idiot clapping in the wrong places. So I sat down and flipped the screen up. It hadn't even locked yet. The last window open was a notes app, the kind people use for grocery lists or passwords they'll forget in a week. But hers? It was a list. A very detailed, very real list titled, "Things to Say Before He Leaves." I remember blinking 3 or 4 times, thinking maybe it was something else. A draft of a play? A joke? A shared Google Doc with a friend? But then I read the first line. "Make sure to say something about his road sign voice. They'll laugh at that." My stomach sank. The list went on. "Don't say anything about the texts unless forced. Mention main trip if it comes up. Pretend it's still happening. If he cries, don't touch him. Makes it worse. Stay calm. He doesn't do well with chaos." There were bullet points about my behavior, my tendencies, even what kind of tone to use if I asked questions. She'd predicted everything I'd do, right down to which hand I'd use to wipe my face when I started to panic. It wasn't just cold. It was clinical. There was a section further down, separated with double asterisks, titled, "Post-dinner timeline if he doesn't leave immediately." It had timestamps. 9:30, shower, 15 to 20 minutes, leave laptop out. 9:45, call May if needed. 10:15, check spare room for charger. 10:30, sleep/reset, tone in morning. It was like watching someone plan the emotional disassembly of a person, of me, not because they were angry, not because they were hurt, but because they wanted to control the narrative, even if it meant breaking someone gently. On a schedule. I closed the laptop quietly before she came out. I didn't say a word when she walked into the living room wearing one of my old t-shirts, acting like nothing happened. She asked if I wanted tea. I told her I had a stomachache. She said, "Poor thing," without looking up from her phone. Then she said goodnight and walked away. I didn't sleep. At 3:17 a.m., I got up, packed a duffel bag, and drove to a 24-hour diner. I ordered pancakes, stared at my reflection in the syrup bottle, and decided I wasn't going back. Not until I knew who May was. Not until I figured out why a woman would rehearse my emotional breakdown like it was a speech at a wedding. And most of all, not until I understood how long this had been going on. Because this wasn't sudden. This was designed. The diner was nearly empty, except for a trucker sleeping in his booth and a waitress who clearly didn't care that I hadn't touched my pancakes. I must have sat there for 2, maybe 3 hours, just going over everything I'd read in that stupid Notes app, replaying that dinner in my head like it was some sick little stage production I didn't know I was cast in. I should have been furious. I should have been hurt. And I was, don't get me wrong, but above all that, what I felt most was small. Like I'd been managed. Handled. Like my wife had practiced my pain the way someone rehearses piano scales. Not because it's beautiful, but because it makes her better. And then, around 6:45 a.m., when the sun was just starting to brush against the windows of the diner, I pulled out my phone and searched the name from her list. May. Just May. No last name. No context. And Google spat back the usual: baby names, Instagram influencers, some therapy podcast. Nothing special. So I went back into her laptop history. Yeah, I know how to remote in. We used to share access for calendar syncing. I never disabled it. She probably forgot it existed. She wasn't exactly tech savvy. There it was. A bookmarked folder labeled M_protocol. Inside, a shared Notion workspace titled simply May. It wasn't a person. It was a guide. This thing looked like a manual for how to emotionally unhook from a partner. I'm not joking. There were modules, written sections, PDFs, templates, like an IKEA instruction set for detaching from someone without setting off alarms. It was cold, modern, and disturbingly articulate. One page was literally titled, "How to Erode Intimacy Without Triggering Abandonment Response." Rowena hadn't written it. It was authored by someone named May Delvine, a supposed emotional detox strategist, whatever the hell that means. Turns out, she runs a private invite-only coaching group for women who want to leave without chaos. Her whole brand is about dismantling emotional dependency in relationships without confrontation, like ghosting, but politely. Rowena had filled in the partner analysis worksheet. I found it in a folder named Practice Runs. She'd rated me on a 10-point scale in categories like overreactions to disappointment, tendency to cling after conflict, likelihood of self-blame, and memory retention of emotional events. My name, my behaviors, my patterns, all cataloged like I was a product being reviewed for return. There were actual graphs. She had data on me, my own wife. But the worst part wasn't that she followed some pseudoscience emotional breakup playbook. No, the worst part was that she'd been tracking my reactions to small stress tests for the last 6 months. I saw the timeline. February 2nd, casually mention ex-boyfriend's name to gauge tension. March 14th, forget dinner plans, note if guilt manipulation occurs. April 9th, sleep in guest room, observe cling behavior. All of those had happened. I remember the fights. The weird moments that didn't feel like her. She was running experiments on me. I wasn't losing my marriage. I was part of a controlled demolition. I wanted to scream, to send it all to her in an email with one word. Why? But I didn't. Because if she was testing me, I suddenly didn't want to give her the result. So instead, I did something I never thought I'd do. I messaged May. Not through her website. That was all locked behind paywalls and vague application forms. But Rowena had a Zoom link saved in the Notion doc. A recurring group call. Weekly. Thursdays at 8 p.m. It was Tuesday. I had 2 days to decide what kind of man I wanted to be when I showed up in that call. A man who still wanted answers? Or a man who wanted revenge? Thursday arrived like a fog. One of those heavy, numb days where every hour feels padded with cotton. I spent most of it pacing my temporary apartment, a 2-room sublet with creaky floors and a floral couch that smelled like someone's grandmother smoked near it for 30 years. The walls were thin, the neighbors loud, and the street outside never stopped buzzing. But none of it distracted me. My mind was locked in one direction. 8 p.m. The Zoom call. I had no plan, really. Just a login link, a shaky internet connection, and a name I pulled out of nowhere, Brendan L. I thought about going with something fake, like Tyler Storm, or something forgettable like John D. But something told me May had seen that trick before. Brendan L. sounded like a guy who wanted to learn about feelings. A man trying. Approachable. Not threatening. At exactly 7:59 p.m., I clicked the link. Black screen. Then a chime. And then they started joining. One by one, windows filled the screen. All women. I counted 12 at first, then 15. Some had their cameras off. Some didn't. They had names like Claire_EMD or Sunflower May 93. Usernames that made them feel anonymous and intimate at the same time. It wasn't what I expected. There were no tears. No chaos. It felt like a book club. Until May joined. She didn't speak at first. Just appeared silently, her camera already on. Mid-40s, sharp cheekbones, black turtleneck, wine glass in hand. She looked like the kind of woman who would never be caught apologizing for her tone. Confident, effortless, practiced. She smiled. "Welcome, everyone," she said. "Tonight we're going to continue our series on structural extraction. And we have some new faces. Brendan, thank you for being brave." My stomach twisted. I forced a nod. Left my camera off. Typed, "Glad to be here," into the chat. She moved on without pause. The topic of the night was passive untethering. How to remove emotional weight without confrontation. The phrases she used sounded like marketing copy, but the meaning behind them was brutal. She was teaching people, mostly women, how to make their partners emotionally dependent while slowly removing their own investment. The idea was that once the partner was fully tethered and vulnerable, detaching became cleaner. Less guilt, less mess. They shared strategies, not anecdotes. Strategies. One woman described how she left a trail of open browser tabs, job boards, apartment listings, just visible enough to stir uncertainty in her boyfriend. Another talked about planting compliments about other men into casual conversations, just to measure her husband's silence. I sat there for nearly 90 minutes, my mouth dry, my hands sweating, listening to a group of people professionally dissect the art of disconnection. Some spoke casually, others like they were reading from a script they had memorized. It felt cultish, but not in a dramatic way. In a corporate way, like a self-improvement workshop dipped in emotional anesthesia. And then, at the very end, May said something that made my heart stop. "Next week," she said, "we'll be doing a showcase. One of our long-term members, who's completed the full protocol, will be sharing her debrief. She's agreed to show her roadmap and timeline from start to finish." She smiled at the camera, leaned in just slightly, and added, "You all know her as R.O. Rowena. R.O." I didn't breathe for a full 30 seconds. She was going to present me. Not just leave me, present me. Like a case study. I was a damn PowerPoint slide in a seminar about emotional exit strategies. I left the call early, faked a tech issue in the chat, and shut my laptop with shaking hands. I didn't know what burned more, the humiliation or the fact that she had never, not once, treated me with that level of clarity or intentionality in our actual relationship. It was like I was worth more to her as a failure than I ever was as a husband. And still, somehow, I wasn't angry. Not yet. Because now I had a week. A week before she stood in front of that group and dissected me like an expired product. A week to decide what to do with the truth. And I had one question echoing in my head louder than all the rest. What if I didn't wait? I didn't text her. I didn't call. I didn't even show up at the house. That would have been expected. And expected things are easy to ignore. What I did instead was worse. Subtle. Quiet. Deliberate. I sent her flowers. Yellow tulips, her favorite. A note attached that said simply, "Thank you for the clarity." No name. No sender info. Just that. And then I waited. I waited like someone who had nothing left to lose, because maybe I didn't. I sat in that awful floral sublet, with its flickering hallway light and the constant buzz of someone else's refrigerator, and I listened for any kind of movement. An email. A knock. A mistake. But nothing came. No text. No missed call. Not even a screenshot to a mutual friend asking if I was okay. Instead, I did what I always do when I'm unraveling. I made a list. Not one like hers, calculated and weaponized. Mine was Messier. Angrier. Written in the Notes app on my phone at 2 a.m., fingers shaking from caffeine and disgust. I titled it, Things That Didn't Make Sense. Here's what I wrote. Why would she wait 6 months to leave, but still sleep next to me every night? Why did her mother go quiet during that dinner? Like she knew. Why would someone need a script to end something? Unless there was more at stake than just love. Why showcase it? Who benefits from that? Why didn't she delete the notes file? And then I added a 6th item, almost without thinking. What's in the garage? That last one came from nowhere. But once it was there, I couldn't shake it. Here's the thing about our garage. It's not a garage. It's more like a storage crypt. The door barely opens. We never parked in it. It was always filled with old books, boxes, a broken elliptical machine that I swore I'd fix, but never did. It was my mess. But it was hers to organize. She loved disappearing in there for hours. Said it helped her sort things mentally. I thought it was harmless. We all need rituals. But now I wondered what else she'd been sorting. I still had the spare key. At 3:12 a.m., I drove back. The street was asleep. No porch lights, no movement, no barking dogs. The house looked exactly the same and completely unfamiliar at the same time. I didn't go inside. I didn't dare. I went straight to the side gate, unlocked it, and slipped through into the backyard, my breath sharp in the cold. The garage door creaked open just enough to squeeze through. I didn't turn on the overhead light. Just used my phone's flashlight. Dust floated in the air like it had been disturbed recently. That wasn't what I expected. Rowena never came in here at night. But someone had. There were shoe prints in the thin coat of dust on the concrete. Not mine. Not from the old boots I used to wear out here. These were smaller, cleaner, deliberate. I started moving boxes. Nothing weird at first. Old photo albums. Christmas lights. The ceramic cat her aunt gave us that I always hated. But then I noticed one bin I didn't recognize. Black plastic. Unlabeled. Heavy. Inside were notebooks. Not one or two. Dozens. All with dates. All in Rowena's handwriting. The first page of the first notebook started like this. Day 1 of detachment. He asked if I wanted pancakes. I said yes. I didn't want them. The second page. Day 4. He asked if I was happy. I said of course. I was already gone. I kept reading. And the entries kept coming. Not just documentation. Observations. Emotional reactions. Rehearsals. She wrote about how I'd respond to bad news. How I reacted to rejection. When I flinched. When I didn't notice she was lying. It wasn't just a journal. It was a manual for manipulation built in real time. Page after page, year after year. Some entries were so mundane, they made my skin crawl. He left the light on again. I didn't remind him. Small erosion equals less dependency. I pretended to forget our anniversary dinner reservation. He laughed it off. That means I can escalate. She called it escalation. I sat on the cold concrete floor, surrounded by the notebooks of a woman I thought I'd loved, and I realized something that made my stomach drop. She wasn't trying to break up. She was trying to document a transformation, hers, not mine. This wasn't about me at all. It never had been. And in one of the last notebooks, dated just 3 weeks ago, I found a sentence that froze my blood. Once I present the full arc, May says I'll be invited into Tier 3. There were tears. Tears of what? Of who? I left the garage without taking anything. I didn't even close the bin. I just stood outside under the pale security light, trying not to vomit, gripping the fence to keep from floating off the earth. Rowena didn't want out of the marriage. She wanted a promotion. And I was just the onboarding material. I didn't sleep after the garage. I didn't even drive back to the sublet. I parked at the edge of an abandoned strip mall 4 blocks from our house and sat with the engine off, my hands on the wheel, the words Tier 3 bouncing around in my skull like a marble in an empty jar. It wasn't just a phrase. It wasn't some metaphor. Not the way she wrote it. May says I'll be invited into Tier 3. That was structured. Formal. It sounded like a stage in a system. A threshold. A room. At 7:11 a.m., I walked into a laundromat just to kill time, sat in one of the hard plastic chairs, and pulled out my phone. I searched every combination of words I could think of: May Delvine Tier 3, Emotional Detox Tier Program, Relationship Offboarding Phases. Most of what came up was garbage. Life coaching PDFs, motivational TikToks, a few podcasts with titles like Clean Heart, Clear Exit. But on the 6th page of results, buried under a broken Pinterest link and a Medium article with 2 claps, I found something that didn't look public. A forum. Low traffic. Mostly password-protected threads. But one topic had a few posts that were still visible. It was titled, Post-Tier Reentry Support, T2, T3. And it had one comment from a user named Test Not Less. The debrief was surreal. We didn't even say their names. Just initials. We read them like drafts. Like manuscripts. Tier 3 doesn't teach you how to leave. It teaches you how to reappear as someone else. That sentence made me nauseous. I clicked the user profile, but it was deactivated. Every post wiped. A ghost in a chair that no longer existed. I couldn't find anything else. No invite links. No apply now buttons. Just scraps. Just enough to know it was real. Whatever Tier 3 was, it was beyond emotional detachment. It was something closer to identity collapse. Reinvention. And Rowena, she wasn't escaping me. She was preparing for initiation. I drove back to the sublet around noon, checked my email, and found something that made me blink twice. An invitation. Not from Rowena. Not from May. From an anonymous Gmail address. No subject line. No body text. Just one link. A private video. I stared at it for 5 full minutes before clicking. The page opened, buffering for a few seconds, and then a single frame. Rowena, sitting in our old living room chair. Not smiling. Not crying. Just composed. Like she was about to deliver a quarterly earnings report. The timestamp showed it had been recorded 3 days ago. And then she spoke. I know by now you've seen the notebooks. And the protocol files. And probably May's call, if you figured out the Zoom link. That's okay. This was always part of the process. She looked off to the side for a second, as if checking something on a screen. Then back to the camera. You're probably angry. Or confused. Or embarrassed. All normal. But I want you to hear me when I say this. You were never the enemy. You were the mirror. My stomach turned. She continued. Tier 3 is an opportunity. Not everyone makes it. Not everyone finishes. But you helped me finish. And I know that probably doesn't make sense now, but someday it might. If you want answers, real answers, there's one left. Just one. She reached off camera and held up a small white envelope with my name, handwritten, across the front. She said, it's in the coat closet, behind the green toolbox. Second shelf. If you go, go alone. If you don't, that's fine too. Either way, thank you. The screen cut to black. I didn't move for an hour. I sat there staring at the frozen frame of her face, trying to decide if it was real gratitude or some well-rehearsed line in a longer script. She knew I'd see the notebooks. She knew I'd dig. She wanted me to. The whole thing had layers, like a test I didn't know I was taking until I'd already failed it. But that envelope, that was new. That wasn't part of the script. That felt like a variable she couldn't control. Or maybe it was just the final act. Either way, I knew I wasn't strong enough to ignore it. At 5:42 p.m., I walked back into the house for the first time in days. It still smelled faintly like her shampoo. The couch blanket still had a dent from where she used to curl up and pretend to read while actually scrolling those forums. I didn't linger. I went straight to the coat closet. Opened the door. Moved the green toolbox. Second shelf. There it was. A plain white envelope. Inside, a folded sheet of paper. One sentence, typed. To go further, you must give something up first. Leave one thing you care about inside this house and walk away from it forever. Then call the number on the back. On the reverse side was a 10-digit number. No name. No area code I recognized. I reread the sentence again. Leave one thing you care about inside this house and walk away from it forever. That was the price of Tier 3. But I wasn't sure anymore if I wanted to follow her or destroy the whole system from the inside. I stared at that envelope for a long time, sitting on the second shelf of our coat closet like it had been waiting for years, not days. The paper still smelled faintly of lavender detergent, the kind Rowena always used on our bedsheets, not because she liked it, but because she once read somewhere that it was psychologically neutral. I used to think that was quirky. Now I wonder if it was just another calculated move to make me attach less meaning to touch, to space, to intimacy. To go further, you must give something up first. Leave one thing you care about inside this house and walk away from it forever. It was such a strange sentence. Not dramatic, not cruel, but so final. It didn't say leave something behind in a metaphorical, inspirational poster kind of way. It said inside this house, like it was a transaction, a toll, a symbolic sacrifice. So I sat on the floor of the entryway, knees drawn up, envelope in my hand, trying to figure out what the hell I could possibly leave that would mean anything. I didn't have much left in that house. Clothes? Forgettable. Books? I could buy new ones. The couch we picked out together, the one that sagged on the left side because I always sat in the same spot during movie nights? That was just furniture now. The framed wedding photo on the mantel was gone. I noticed that immediately when I walked in. So was the ceramic bowl I made her during that pottery class she booked for our anniversary. The one where she laughed at how bad I was at shaping clay. She said it was adorably tragic. I believed her. What do you leave behind when you've already been stripped of everything? And then it hit me. There was one thing left in that house that still held weight. Not because it was valuable, but because of what it meant, or what it used to mean. A small, cracked snow globe sitting in the back of the bedroom drawer. A souvenir from our second year together, during that Christmas in Montana, when we got snowed in at a cabin with no heat and ended up sleeping in the same sleeping bag for warmth. It was a stupid thing. A $12 novelty gift shop snow globe with a tiny bear in a Santa hat. But I kept it. All these years. Quietly. It had no practical use, no aesthetic value. But for me, it held that one memory untouched by doubt. The only one that still felt pure. So I went upstairs, opened the drawer, pulled it out. The base was chipped. The water inside was a little cloudy. But when I shook it, the glitter still danced around the bear's stupid little plastic smile. I walked downstairs, placed it gently on the center of the dining room table, the same table where she'd once tapped her glass 3 times to announce the start of my emotional dissection. And I left it there, not because I forgave her, not because I wanted to move on, but because I knew that to understand any of this, I had to follow the thread to the very end, even if it meant abandoning the only thing that still reminded me of who we used to be before all the architecture and the scripts and the silence. Then I took out the envelope, dialed the number. It rang once, then twice, and on the third ring, a voice answered. But it wasn't Rowena. It was a man, calm, mid-30s maybe, polite, but with a faint hum of something automated in his tone, not robotic, just trained. Like someone who had answered this same call 100 times before and already knew how the conversation would go. He said, "Thank you for completing the entry act. Do you consent to continuing?" I didn't speak at first. I just sat there with the phone pressed to my ear, the sound of his voice echoing around the empty walls of the hallway like a challenge. He repeated it. "Do you consent to continuing?" I said yes. He told me a location. Not an address, just a set of directions. A rural highway. A turnoff near a fire-damaged rest stop. A long road that leads to the facility, as he put it. Facility. I asked if Rowena would be there. He didn't answer that. He just said, "You'll be met at the gate. There will be questions. You'll need to be honest." And then he hung up. I don't know why I expected anything else. I don't know why some part of me was hoping it would be May herself on the other end, whispering riddles or promising closure. But it wasn't. It was protocol. Everything in this system is protocol. There's no love in it. No catharsis. Just steps. Sequences. Controlled descent. Still, I packed a bag. Not much. Just a change of clothes, my phone, a pen, and one photograph. Not of us. Of me. Before her. A grainy print from a college ID photo booth, where I still had color in my face and too much hair. I took it not to remember who I was, but to remind myself that I existed before I became material for someone else's transformation. Tomorrow morning, I'll drive to that road. I'll follow it wherever it leads. Maybe I'm walking into something monstrous. Maybe I'm just chasing a shadow. But I need to know how deep this thing goes. What Tier 3 really is. Who else is in it? And how many versions of me she rehearsed before she finally perfected the performance. Because I don't want closure anymore. I want context.